Call it the MPR or benchmark interest rate. The story is that, as you have seen, it's still at 11.5%. But the bigger picture or the bigger question this morning is, what does that mean? How does that affect you and I, macro, micro, and all of the value chain, as it were? As you've seen, we're joined this morning to take a look at the implications and what this means by Mr. Ayo Teriba, who is a CEO, Economic Associates, is a lecturer in Nigerian University of Technology and Management, Lagos. Is also coordinator, the TWG on Financial Sector and Capital Markets National Development Plans 2021 to 2025, as well as other plans. Is a vice chairman, technical committee of the National Council on Privatization, and he joins us via Zoom from Lagos here in Nigeria. It's good to have you on the program, Mr. Teriba. So a lot of figures, really, listening to the head of the CBN, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, going through the background and all of that. But I wonder for you what you expected, because the factor a lot of people were looking at is inflation. And you see people saying, well, we kept the rates in spite of the rise in inflation. Did you expect it to be tightened, to be loosened, or to be held? What were your expectations?
Right. The variables that the central bank has to consider cannot be limited to inflation at a time of renewed global uncertainty triggered by the invasion of Ukraine. We struggle with growth. We struggle with exchange rates. We struggle with liquidity. And we struggle with inflation. In the order of things, you prioritize exchange rate stability over inflation, because the sort of inflation that we have merely reflects the cost push effects of devaluation and the supply disruptions coming from renewed supply disruptions coming from the war in Ukraine. So I wasn't expecting that the central bank would be claiming to be in any position to do anything about inflation. It's going to, the cost push inflation will, die off on its own in the process of time. If it was demand push, that you would be talking about the central bank raising rates to affect to reduce inflation. However, you cannot be raising rates when growth remains weak. Neither can you cut rates when you have demand pressures, on the foreign exchange market. What the central bank needs to consider is not to confine itself with several meetings in which it comes to explain why it cannot act, but to take strategic steps to boost the supply of foreign exchange in the country. I think that's the number one challenge, for monetary policy management. And you can't limit yourself to the foreign investment that incremental movements in interest rates can adjust. Sometimes you rely on price, sometimes you rely on, quantity measures. So I do think that we need to encourage the central bank to take the kind of extraordinary measures it has been taking in other spheres of the economy, which it calls interventions. The governor of the central bank was just telling us about the likely interventions that could be required to ease the supply of petroleum products. The committee should consider possible interventions that could boost the wholesale supply of foreign exchange. If they reflect on that, there could be one or two steps that you can take that is going to raise the foreign reserves beyond what the oil price would give the country. The oil price is very unstable. And ironically, now that the price is up, we are challenged on production.
Right.
So we need to look beyond oil and see what buttons Nigeria can press to boost foreign exchange supply.
And that's the question now. If I could just, pardon me, just to follow up on that one about the exchange rate, because it would seem that the CBN has been very cautious over time, retaining these key parameters. And it would seem as though the CBN is just trying to be careful so you don't, tip the cart, as it were. So what are the options available? Because as you said, there are various factors before the CBN. There's growth, there's liquidity, there's inflation, and then the all-important forex. So what are the options available for the CBN, and how hard will it be to take these steps? Because there's also meant to be support from the people in whatever decision the CBN takes. So what are the options available to boost forex, which is a big one?
Right. The central bank macroeconomic policy management requires the central bank to coordinate with the managers of the fiscal side of the economy to ensure that there's harmony in what they're doing. Last week, we had the debt management office coming out to tell us the debt figures for the country and telling us their latest issue in the Eurobonds market. It's all about liquidity. The debt management is about liquidity management. The spending, of the federal government borrowing to supplement spending is liquidity management. So if the debt management office could be talking to the country about raising Eurobonds between the central bank, the debt management office, and the Federal Ministry of Finance, they should bring proposals on the table on how we could also raise, for example, instead of bonds, which is debt, equity, looking for foreign direct investment, to come into the country to finance some of the things that we are currently borrowing to do. So Eurobond is debt. Foreign direct investment is equity. Nigeria only issues debt instruments at home and abroad. Nigeria can also issue equity. Some of the assets that you are trying to borrow to fund, you could offer equity ownership. This is a very reliable way, perhaps the most reliable way open to countries around the world to ease liquidity, to boost foreign exchange in their countries and stabilize the exchange rate. Because if the exchange rate is not stable, price will not be stable, growth will be challenged, interest rates will be high, and so on and so forth. So I'm saying that it shouldn't be difficult for the central bank to work in concert with the Ministry of Finance and the debt management office to think of equity offer opportunities. Nigeria owns a lot of assets. We don't have the money to fund them, and yet we insist on owning them 100%. So issue some equity. It could be 5%, it could be 1%, that brings foreign exchange liquidity into the country and helps puts the central bank in a position that it can act. If you are cautious all the time, you don't want to rock the boat all the time, then I'm not sure if that's holding, or I'm not sure how long you have to do that before it begins to look as inaction.
Okay.
Before it starts to look like you are just backing, but when you need actually to buy it.
Well, Dr. Teriba, sometimes, speaking about these macroeconomic issues, sometimes sound like we talk above the heads of so many people who are more concerned about their microeconomic issues. And perhaps that's one of the reasons. So there will perhaps be a need for you to help, marry those ones, because so long as people do not have, money to spend to fund their businesses, ease of doing business, parameters you may have heard, when we're looking at the papers, when one of our paper review guests was talking about the fact that no matter what the ease of doing business reforms that the government may have evolved, so long as there are other issues that are not planned for, or that were not foreseen, such as fuel scarcity, electricity challenges, they will continue to, for want of a better word, mess up the efforts that are being made to reform the ease of doing business parameters of government. So in that wise, what would be your take, especially for that sector of the economy, the micro, small, and medium enterprises that form the bulk of what drives an economy? When the challenges are there, ease of doing business reforms are being taken, on by the agencies, and yet we seem to have some punctures in the tires when we're supposed to be cruising.
Well, now you just use the word punctures in the tires. There are problems that you have to zoom in on and solve them one at a time. You cannot lump everything together. You've mentioned ease of doing business. You've mentioned disruptions to the fuel supply. You've mentioned disruptions to the power supply. You don't have the luxury, of painting it all with the same brush. You have to get into the specifics of where the disruptions are coming from and solve them one at a time. So we were talking about, easing monetary policy or bringing inflation under control, providing adequate liquidity. You have to solve that, on its own, and then let the people who run the power sector come and tell us what the challenges are.
But at the end of the day, my apologies, Dr. Toriba, at the end of the day, you and I know that the Nigerian doesn't really have the patience to care who is supposed to solve what. They just want to get to the fuel station and not have to wait for too long. Switch off the power, switch on or off the power, and the switch responds without any challenge. But these challenges have been there for so many years with promises that we're going to do something about it, and it will seem like this is the way it is. So that's why it seems, because at the end of the day, sir, that these are the challenges that people confront every day. Small businesses confront these challenges every day. They try to take them on. Before they're done dealing with one, another one rears its head. And they expect that government should be ahead of it, no matter what the challenge.
Well, fuel scarcity is by no means a challenge that we encounter every day. The current one has been protracted. It's been on for maybe 2 months, but we hadn't had it for years before now. So we shouldn't create the impression that it's an everyday problem. Similar, maybe, power disruptions to power supply in parts of the country could be described as closer to everyday challenge. But still, you can't solve all of the problems together. You have to keep zooming in, and looking for what's causing disruptions. Disruptions are experienced all over. Nigeria is not the first country this year to suffer fuel scarcity, and we've even seen developed countries suffer fuel scarcity. So I do not think that, I'm not excusing, the failure of those maybe errors of commission or errors of commission, the past of those who are managing the sector, but we should also refrain from making mountains out of molehills. Efforts are being made to resolve it. The central bank governor has just spoken, about if there are interventions they could make, they will make it. And I think we should also, on our part, exercise some patience in times like this and not begin to create the impression that the problem that's been with us for 2 months has been with us for 20 years.
But don't you think, Doctor, that 2 months don't you think that 2 months is significant enough? I mean, this is off tangent
I'm not
of some sort, but so we don't sound insensitive to people who are probably listening to us from the filling stations this morning. And I mean, 2 months, that's quite some time.
It's not insulting anybody if we are encouraging people to be patient and to show understanding on the, about the people managing. You can't crucify, the people managing the sector just because some people are queuing at the station. So let's be balanced. Yes, It's not a good situation to be in. It affects all of us. It affects me. Yeah, then we have to still, temper our comments or our reactions, with some moderation.
My
That's my
apology.
point.
I actually asked that question against the backdrop of what you're saying about the economy. Ultimately, no matter what policy issues are raised, so long as there are other things that get in the way, that seem to, as you also referenced the other time, puncture the tires, it would seem like the effect is direct. But there's something else that the CBN governor mentioned, when in that briefing. He talked about, one of the policies that government has been working on. He said, and I quote, "If agricultural output in our various products are improved, we will see a further moderation in food inflation, which moderates headline inflation. If these actions are taken, we are reasonably confident that inflation will come down." Are you as optimistic as he is?
Well, there's no optimism about an if and then statement that the central bank governor has made. Is making a conditional statement. If agricultural, output increases, prices will moderate. There is no optimism about that. What if not? Basically, if you be saying that.
Doesn't that also raise a little worry, because inflation figures are not quite friendly? So are you by any chance saying that those conditions that is given do not look as favorable as they sound?
There will always, whatever the situation, there will always be room for improvement. So he's talking about, I'm not a spokesman for the governor of the central bank. He should have looked for a way of interrogating him on his own statement. But I don't see anything that one will disagree with in the statement that he has made. He's saying that improved supply, whether food or non-food items, will ease inflation, and it's difficult to argue with him on that.
All right. So let's break this down even further. I imagine a lot of Nigerians listening to us, off the back of holding the rates 11.5 and other parameters, keeping them, and they're wondering, how do I approach, my small business, my larger than small business, or my personal finances and all of that? The implication of this, this is the second in the year, and some have predicted that this year will be quite tricky. Now we have the Russia-Ukraine situation in our hands, and the projections have gone out of the window. So how should people position themselves at this time? And I hope you can actually go up the ladder, as it were, for individuals, small businesses, and for the bigger companies. Don't forget there's a challenge of inflation, Forex, the energy crisis, insecurity as well. All of these, the CBN actually mentioned, saying, it's a very tricky period we're in right now. So how should people progress?
All right, let's get this clear. The current source of uncertainty in the world is the invasion of Ukraine, or the war that Russia has launched on Ukraine. So we suffer the supply disruptions coming out of that. And it's doubly painful because we have just exited, as it were, a pandemic, that led to disruptions as well. But, okay, the pandemic was global. It was here in Nigeria, like it was in every other country in the world. But this war in Ukraine is not in Nigeria. So it's Ukraine that is in the war. That you can be asking, how should individuals, how should companies, how should cities, our citizens have already, been brought back from Ukraine. And some have escaped to other countries. Now, we are not at war. So don't make it sound as if, the supply disruptions that we are experiencing is a situation of war. We still have peace. And if the people who are facing the war can cope, God forbid that we face a situation as severe as that, then I and you similarly can cope, with this, short-term difficulties in getting fuel or dealing with increased prices in the aftermath of a devaluation or dealing with the hardship imposed by a recession. Not the best of situation, but it's not an extreme situation. We shouldn't make it sound like it's an extreme situation.
No, the question, I don't think you got me right. So this is me actually quoting the statement of the governor of the central bank, where he listed these issues, including the Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, the term he used was imported inflation, essentially saying a lot of these things are not really within our realm of control. But the point I'm trying to get to here is to equip businesses. We don't know how long this will last for. A lot of the products we import, we get them from either Russia or Ukraine, and we've seen what that is doing to some businesses here. We had conversations with manufacturers recently where they spoke about this thing. So my question is how people can, coordinate themselves so that they can individually as a business have some buffer. Who knows how long this will take? So we at least are well equipped to handle this properly. So this is essentially trying to get equipping for individuals and business on the back of this recent rate announcement. That's the point I'm trying to make.
That's the role of policy, to help agents, cope with situations. And our point of departure was what could the central bank have done? They held all the policy levers. And I had suggested what they could do, give them room the time and then analyze things up and down and say we held, requires them to put money on the table. So, and I've suggested that rather than looking perpetually at debt, raising debt, the government can raise equity, which you don't pay interest on, which you don't repay, because we have a lot of room for equity issuance. That may sound above the head of some hearers, as Ayo did say, but I wonder, in contrast between debt and equity is not abstract. Okay. So I've suggested where government can find a resource so that they can intervene more and pushing the pains individuals are facing, pushing the pains companies are facing, and pushing the systemic pains that all of us are facing. Basically, that's the long and short of it. Right. And we have to encourage the central bank, to not to limit its interventions to fiscal side of things. The foreign exchange shortage pinches more, than the loans they give to relief, unless you are able to get more foreign reserves to ease the foreign exchange pain. And ease many of the disruptions that is causing bottlenecks in the system.
Okay, well, Dr. Tereba, we need to go on a quick break now. Pardon me. So we need to go on a break, but this is what we'll do. We'll come back, and I'll let you land on that point and take on some other issues. People have talked about having some sort of interaction, broader interaction with the diaspora world. You talked about getting equity. So can we lean on that, the fiscal angle of things, and the coming days? Because the CBN governor also talked about possible disruption to food production. So we'll talk about these issues when we return in a moment. So please stay with us. Well, let's continue our conversation with Dr. Ayo Tereba, who is CEO, Economic Associates. He's also Vice Chairman of the Technical Committee of the National Council on Privatization. Now, I specifically mentioned that cap that you wear, the National Council of Privatization, because you talked about this equity offer opportunities. I know a large chunk of a challenge we're facing in recent times has to do with Forex. In fact, you go to the market these days, and the market women will tell you, yes, dollar is expensive. That's why the tomatoes are expensive and all of that. So you can imagine the ripple effects we have. So in terms of this equity office, how should we go about it? I think I've come across that idea before, but it looks like that's an option we should focus on. So should we lean on our diaspora capital, which we say is vast, or should we go for others outside, that circle? How do you think we should approach this? Because it looks like it might just be a game changer.
Thank you very much. The statement I was making that you said when we return I land on it is, look, even the fuel supply destruction, by the time we check, inadequate foreign exchange, will be one of the issues. Inadequate foreign exchange supply has precipitated devaluation, and it's that devaluation that keeps bringing up fresh need to adjust the pump prices. But you hit the nail on the head when you speak about how to get external liquidity. The quote of the central bank governor that you put up there spoke about fiscal and monetary stimulus. Those two are part of the problem. But the foreign exchange shortage loomed larger than the fiscal and monetary stimulus that we are providing. You announced that you are providing intervention funds of $1 trillion or 2 trillion naira. $1 trillion naira 4 years ago is what twice the value of $1 trillion naira today, just for the simple reason of devaluation. So if the government can work in concert, the fiscal authorities and monetary authorities, to look for what they can do to ease the foreign exchange. Foreign exchange is scarce in Nigeria. It's in surplus globally. Foreign investment is surging, and the countries that are able to get their acts together and bring forth enough offers. The difference between us and the countries that are getting the foreign exchange inflows are that they are making a lot more offers than us, and they are, consummating more foreign investment deals than us. Both in all of the projects that government says we are borrowing to invest in them, we want to do PPP on them. What India and Brazil does is to list all of these projects on the website. And it's open not just to diaspora investors, it's open to domestic investors, it's open to foreign investors, it's open to diaspora investors. That's what we have to do. It will ease our liquidity supply. It will create opportunities for other people to come and use their money to develop all of those sectors. Like we are benefiting, from foreign investment in the LNG plant. It's now going into the 7th train. We are benefiting from foreign investment in the GSM telephony, more than 160 million lines. Why are we hesitant to open other sectors? These are the things that we have to do as a country, to get liquidity into adequately. Unless we solve the foreign exchange liquidity problems, fiscal stimulus or monetary stimulus will not.
And I think that's a fine, right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fine place to leave it. Very instructive ideas that you have submitted. But I'd like to thank you so much for those thoughts on the program this morning. Dr. Ayo Teriba is a CEO, Economic Associates, lecturer at Nigerian University of Technology and Management, Lagos, as well as other caps that he wears. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you.
You must have heard this said so many times. Proven beyond reasonable doubt. Even reasonable doubt needs to be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Well, I don't understand much of law, but our guest does, to talk us through some of the issues that's been evolving concerning defections in the political parties so far. Wale Balogun is a legal practitioner and partner, Greenbridge Partners. He joined us from our studios in Abuja. Thanks for joining us this morning. Well, I don't know, first of all, you want to speak to what you heard the senior advocate of Nigeria say just before we came on concerning the issue of the judgment on the 20 lawmakers in Cross River State?
Yes, it is indeed
Go ahead.
an interesting position, so to say. What the learned, distinguished senior advocate talked about. He raised two fundamental issues about his disagreement with the court with respect to the territorial issue. Why should they come to Abuja? Then, of course, he's talking about the said crisis in PDP. All these two issues, they are not difficult issues to understand, and they are in the public domain. What is the crisis in PDP is in the public domain. Then the issue of territorial issue, yes, I agree with him. That's the position with respect to the Federal High Court Chief Judge on the issue of filing political matters in the territorial divisions where cause of action arises. However, you see, when you're talking about the issue of constitutional interpretation, there have been diverse views with respect to the position of the Federal High Court. There have been decisions up to the Supreme Court that when it comes to issue of constitutional interpretation, then the issue of the territorial jurisdiction of the division of the Federal High Court perhaps may have to take a back seat. Ideally, I have no issue. The Federal High Court is supposed to be one, whether in Calabar or whether in Abuja. But the position is actually much more important than that. It's a very volatile and germane constitutional issue. To me, this is the crux of the matter. The issue of defection is a very fundamental issue. So the issue of whether it's determined in Calabar or it's determined in Abuja, to me, is a secondary issue. The primary issue possibly we should be considering now is to look at the issue of defection and the implication on our polity. This is what I believe is more important.
Well, the issue of defection is, substantial, because even the Constitution seems to be clear about it, or isn't it? Isn't the Constitution clear about what happens when legislators, whether in the National Assembly or state houses of assembly, move from one political party that sponsored them into office to another?
You are very right. If there's anything that the Constitution is very clear about, is this position. You are talking about Section 68 with respect to the House of Rep, with respect to the Senate, then Section 109 of the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, that's amended. The position of the law, not just statute, of the Constitution, which is the organic law of the land, the ground norm, is very explicit. Unlike the corresponding position with respect to the executive, as far as the issue of the legislators are concerned, if you defect, the condition under which you can defect is explicitly stated. If you look specifically at subsection 1, sub G, the conditions are stated there. And these are conditions that are a matter of fact. Are the facts well settled? You have to be able to show, one, that there is indeed factionalization in a political party. There's faction A, there's faction B. Alternatively, you must be able to show, by question of fact too, that there is indeed a merger of 2 or 3 political parties. Say, for instance, you belong to NCP. NCP has now merged with APC and has now merged with PDP. 3 parties now coming together. These are clear-cut provisions of the Constitution. Or the condition under which you can now say, oh, I want to change to another party. I want to cross carpet to another party. Or I want to opt into another party. The Constitution have given explicit provision for that as far as the issue of the legislation is concerned. So I have no doubt that the learned Sikh too, it will be very conversant with this provision. And they are not just letters of the Constitution. They are positions that have been determined by our courts all the way to Supreme Court. So it's not a new issue. And it's not a naughty issue of law. It's not a difficult issue of law.
If you can hear me, why then do we litigate over it if it is as clear? I remember, there's a case back in, previous administrations in the National Assembly where there have been defections, but then for one reason or the other, the principal officers or maybe the Senate or the House of Representatives says, well, that it didn't happen. The movement wasn't allowed. So if the Constitution is clear about it, how come then that this has been happening willy-nilly, and it will seem like until now, no one is really ready to enforce the Constitution?
Yeah, I agree with you. Two issues, two reasons, among others. You want to look at the wordings of our Constitution, that Section 68, Section 109, for both the State House of Assemblies and for the Senate and the House of Rep. I must agree with you. They are worded in such a way that is a little bit cumbersome, particularly when you are doing a comparative analysis of Nigerian Constitution with Indian Constitution. And Indian Constitution equally has a similar provision. But indeed, unlike ours, that is expressly worded what will be the procedure if you jump from one political party to another without certain yardstick that have been defined by the Constitution being met. It is very explicit that you are expected to tender your resignation letter within a defined period, within 14 days. If you fail to do that, then your position is deemed to have been vacated. Unfortunately, our Constitution here is not as explicit. So that gives room for the principal officers of the National Assembly and the State Assembly to be able to interfere with it. That is constitutional problem on its own in terms of the drafting, the wordings of the relevant section of the Constitution 68 and 109. Secondly, you possibly may be talking about, we have had the issue of the former Senate President, Dr. Saraki. We have also had the issue of the present governor of Sokoto State, when he was the speaker, moving from PDP to APC, from APC back to PDP. We have seen all this. But if you look at those scenarios, for whatever reason, some of them were actually not challenged. In fact, even in this current regime, we have had a couple of states where there have been such defection and nobody took it up. Perhaps they were just politically overwhelmed and they didn't do anything about that. However, there are instances of states where such issues have been taken up. We have had issues in Ondo State, we have had issues in Plateau State, we have had in Delta State, where similar decisions have been taken up. Now you raise that issue. If it's so explicit, why are then people still litigating on it? Regrettably, it's a Nigerian thing. Then it's also a weakness on our jurisprudence. If a legal practitioner, if the position of the law is so clear, and a legal practitioner will approach a court on issue that has been determined up to the Supreme Court, that becomes an issue of ethics, a disciplinary issue, where a party can approach the court that this lawyer knows the position of the law, which has been determined by the Supreme Court, now comes to court to also ask court to litigate on similar position. It becomes the issue of misconduct. So indeed, it is not right for lawyers, irrespective of the caliber, to approach a court on a well-settled issue of law, like this particular one.
All right.
Everybody, even people on the street, you don't have to be a lawyer. You should be able to establish, indeed, has there been shown that there's a division in PDP? Anybody on the street can answer this question.
But you know, the
is
question
there a merger?
now is...
These are the two scenarios.
If you can hear me, the question is, I mean, people will say, which political party really does not have divisions? I mean, look at the ruling party and the opposition today. If there's anything, they have issues internally. So you wonder, at what point won't you have these issues? But that aside, it would seem that there's a new trend now, because just about 3 weeks ago, we had the Federal High Court's judgment on the Ebonyi lawmakers as well, and now we have this one. So it will look like there's a new trend of... perhaps the judiciary trying to reduce these instances of, defecting with mandate. But there was a point that was made yesterday, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, about whether or not they had indeed defected. So they said, well, they didn't defect, or what? They don't have membership card of the APC, when indeed there were pictures and announcements that they had defected and all of that. It said they got an expulsion letter, what have you. So really, at what point, is defection validated? Is it when you start associating yourself with a new political party, when you pick up the card, or when you're expelled from your party? Is the law explicit on that one?
The scenario you have mentioned, and just like I referred to earlier, these are questions of facts. Nigerian politicians, just like we have seen, they do not defect quietly. They defect to the knowledge of every member of the society. For instance, the technical aspect, which is the details of the fact, oh, have they been expelled? You know, it's a technical issue that can be taken up. Expulsion is not one of the grounds, as stated by the Constitution, that you are expelled. It's not one of the grounds. The Constitution is explicit. It said that there is a factionalization. And we have also seen factionalization of PDP in this country before. So it's not the fact that political parties are having internal squabbles, they are having issues within themselves, that does not amount to factionalization of the party. For instance, we just saw what happened in APC recently. The issue of the acting chairman traveling for medicals and another person acting. That person never claimed to be substantive chairman. He said he was acting. So that's not tantamount to factionalization of the party. So if you say PDP is factionalized, who is the alternative chairman of another faction of it? They are all questions of fact. They all have issues.
Mr. Balogun, just 1 second. You just said something now that expulsion is not a ground recognized in the Constitution. So if a political party, for instance, expels a member who has been voted into office, maybe in the National Assembly or something, the party expels that member, what happens to that person? What happens to that officer? What happens to that seat?
In my candid view, the particular candidate or the particular person remains in office because his expulsion is not born out of his willingness to join another political party. You might call that as a gap in our constitution. Of course, God forbid that constitution makes provision for every scenario. But the constitution and the constitution maker in their wisdom, they have only provided two scenarios. It's either there is factionalization as established by fact, or there is a merger. So constitution cannot make provision for everything. If you are a member of a political party and you have issues with your party and you are expelled, that is beyond you. It's not a voluntary act of leaving party A to go to party B. So to me, there's no difficulty with that.
So should the political
a
party,
member of the Senate or a member of that
should that political party, my apologies, should that political party go to court and say to the court, this fellow has been expelled by our party, we want our mandate back? The question then you'll be asking is there a confusion as to the ownership of the vote, the person or the party, as has been ruled recently?
Indeed, you have just touched another very naughty point. It is the issue of, it's an ongoing issue now with respect to Ebonyi State. Is it political party or is it candidate? My view is that a combination of both. But then, we are not navigating a novel position here. This is a position that's equally been determined. That's why the Constitution, as you know it, is an evolving document. It's an organic document that is being made to allow for growth and development. If you look at the genesis of this word, is the vote cast for political party or for candidate. The genesis began from Ameshi's case. And Ameshi's case, when that incident happened, of course, it could not. You can't review that Ameshi's case in isolation. But then the law has evolved since Ameshi's case. Supreme Court has taken, immediately after Ameshi's case, the lawmaker, in their wisdom, amended the law to forbid, to restrain such scenario. That is Section 141 of the Electoral Act, whereby they now say, never again should a candidate like Amechi emerge, having not participated in the entire electoral process. So before you can become a flag bearer of a party now, or you can become a winner, You must have participated in every segment because election is a process. So after Amaechi, there was an amendment. So in law, such is allowed. The National Assembly, they have amended the law to actually tactically overrule the position of the Supreme Court there. That's not the end of it. The Supreme Court itself, along from the High Court to the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court, they have also bought into the amendment by the National Assembly to now say, oh, it's a marriage of both. The party sponsor a candidate, and the people vote for candidate using the platform of political party. Oh, there have been instances where say, oh, if you go and vote, it's the logo of political party you see there. But after the voting, you will see so many provisions of the Constitution and of the Electoral Act talking about the candidate shall be declared. So there's a lot that has to do with the candidate. Unfortunately, not we have the position of the independent candidate. We have not been able to ascertain the current position of the Constitution on it. But as far as we are concerned now, I am of the view that actually both of them, you know, for the voters, you have party loyalists who will only vote for their party, irrespective of who they sponsor. You also have some people that are political. They look at the candidate. Oh, this is the candidate. I believe this person can deliver. They don't belong to any political party. They don't have loyalty to any political party. They vote for individual. Indeed, it's a marriage. It's a cocktail of both positions. But as far as our jurisprudence is concerned on who is the vote cast for today, the position of the law is that the votes are cast for candidate. It used to be for political party. That was Amaechi. But after post-Amaechi, the laws has evolved to now say that the political party is a vehicle. It's just a platform by which there's a recent decision of CPC and Obugoda. And there's also another one by the Court of Appeal recently where they talk about Amaechi's position. If you see a Ebonyi case, where it's still an ongoing matter, Ebonyi case is primarily premised on the fact that the votes are cast for political party. It's primarily premised on Amaechi's. If you read that judgment, they are talking about Amaechi, Faleke, Kogi scenario. But the Supreme Court, in that CPC and Buguda's case, they have reviewed that we, by this decision, have set aside Amaechi's position. So it's Amaechi's position by the Supreme Court that is the political party that people cast their vote for. But the Supreme Court have departed. In addition to the position of the National Assembly, having amended the Electoral Act. So the law has evolved to meet the current position of the law. So the view of the law as it is now is that the political party is the platform, but the candidate wins the election.
Okay, Mr. Balogun, if you can hear me, I just want to read a portion of the judgment by Justice Taiwo yesterday, saying that a day will come when elected officers must resign their post if they migrate to another party or seek the permission of the people for permission before they decamp. Also said they had a vehicle which conveyed them, and that vehicle belongs to the plaintiff. I imagine in this case, the PDP. They went and say they cannot abandon the vehicle. And I just, as we wind down in about a minute, I just want to ask you, I mean, we've had people defect in recent time, from governors to lawmakers and all of that. Well, their cases, I imagine, are not in court just yet, as we've seen with Ebonyi and Cross River. Should they be worried?
Well, the clock therein is the wheel of Nigerian justice, just like anywhere in the world, grind so slowly. These dramatic personnel, they have barely 10 months to leave the office. Will they be able to, will Supreme Court be able to pronounce on both Ebonyi State matter or Cross River matter by the time these guys will have left the office? So then the question will now be whether indeed they should be worried. The time, it's only time will tell, because the money of the, of course, all the matters, they are going to go to Supreme Court. But then, not the Ebonyi case is in Court of Appeal already, but they have not settled, possibly they have not settled their brief. Before they settle their brief, before the Court of Appeal will hear them, and before the matter will proceed to Supreme Court, February will be here. February, there will be another national election. For whatever is worth, I believe Supreme Court is going to reiterate its position on this point, whether they are out of office or within, but at least to be able to also make the position of the law ascertainable and also settle that point on whether is this political party or is the candidate or is he both. Indeed, I agree with Justice Taiwo. That his position, which he just read out, is consistent with Indian constitution. If morally, I'm sure all of us are on the same page. Morally, if you use party A to get to an office, if you want to join party B by section 40 of the constitution, which is pronounced upon even in that air-quote matter, you are at liberty. Even Supreme Court in Atiku Abubakar's case, you are at liberty to join another party. However, there will be consequences. You should be able to resign your position. Then you are free to go and seek for electorate support to join party B and contest under that banner. I feel that is the right thing to do. However, is that the position of the law now? It's another ball game entirely. You know, the law as it is and the law as it ought to be. They are two different things entirely. So as it is now, the law, as far as executive is concerned, is they are allowed to jump anyhow without consequences. That is determined by Supreme Court, Attorney General of Federation, and Atiku Abubakar during the Obasanjo regime. They said, no, stop there. In the wisdom of the constitutional maker, they put that clause for the legislature, but for the executive, they deliberately did not put it for whatever reason. So, for as far as we are concerned today, the constitutional provision is set to concerning the National Assembly and the House of Assembly, but with respect to the executive, there's no provision. Yeah, we have just seen Justice Eko's decision now in Eboyin. Even though Justice Eko in that judgment also refer to the explicit provision with respect to the legislature. He said, however, despite the fact that there's no provision for the executive, my Lord now went further to now say, that notwithstanding, should they now be allowed to continue this way? You know, some people will say that's the realm of morality.
Well, Mr. Balogun, it's interesting, you know, that, you know, the more we discuss these issues, trying to resolve them, the more the onion peels, and then we see more and more perspectives to it. Most certainly an ongoing conversation. But for now, we have to thank you so much for being a part of our program this morning. Wale Balogun is a legal practitioner and partner with Greenbridge Partners. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Well, you'll need a glass of water for this conversation we're about to have right now. Oh, yeah. So you have yours handy. I have mine, too. Well, today is 22/3/22. Yes, it's a unique date, going by the number, but it's also World Water Day. And the theme for this year's commemoration, but I call it celebration, is groundwater, making the invisible visible. Now, I'll tell you about a 2019 report, a federal government report, which says that, yes, 70% of Nigerians have access to basic drinking water services. So that leaves 30% out. Also says the amount and quality of water for individual use is lower than the required standard, and it puts it to an average of 9 liters per day for an average Nigerian. But this one is shocking, that 1/3 of the population drinks contaminated water at home. I mean, lots of questions, lots of concerns. You remember that song about water not having an enemy? Well, let's have this conversation this morning with Mr. Saliu Ahmed. He's Managing Director, Benin Owena River Basin Development Authority. He joins us live from our Benin studio. Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the program. I do hope, I'm sure you've had water this morning. It goes to speak to how important this conversation is. But 2019, that report came out. You are in this sector an active player. Today, how far would you say we have come in ensuring that everyone has access to potable water?
Thank you very much for having me. It's indeed my pleasure to be your medium on this day when the entire world celebrates World Water Day. Water, you know, it's basic to the survival of everything, every life, everything, plants and animals, all over the world, apart from the numerous other services that are derivable from water. The fact is, between 1919 and today, a lot more awareness has been created on the issues of water and the reason why there should be a sustainable management of our water resources. The Federal Ministry of Water Resources and all its agencies, including the Benin or Wena River Basin Development Authority, has been in the forefront, drawing attention to the issues that is the level of water and water supply across our country. And on this day in particular, when the entire world celebrates World Water Day, the issues are even more relevant. Water is life. Water sustains life, and therefore there is a need for everyone to be on board in ensuring that our management and handling of water, whether it's on the surface or under the surface, is done in a sustainable manner that guarantees access, to others. This is a fact, and in Nigeria, yes, our access to water has improved from year to year. We've also tried to draw attention to the involvement of the private sector, especially to invest in water, because water is no more a charitable good. Water is a resource that is exhaustible, and therefore it needs handled with care. Water should not be wasted by anyone, anytime, because when you waste water, you are depriving somebody else of access to water. Like, water can also be described as a right, a human right of everyone and everything, because like I said, every life depends on it. The investment in water needs to be far more than we have seen at all levels of government, local to state and the federal government. That is why the Federal Minister of Water Resources, Suleiman Hussein Adamu, has been in the forefront, drawing attention to the need, for greater investment and greater attention, to water to ensure access to all across the country. In Nigeria,
my apologies, I thought you had landed. There was something, my colleague quoted when he started to talk, the fact that 1/3 of Nigerians don't have access to the right kind of water. In fact, I'm sure you have some more of these statistics that speaks to access to contaminated water more. And you've talked about the fact that, various levels of government are playing the roles that they can play. One of the roles that one expects that government can play is ensuring that people don't just dig water, boreholes and all of that anyhow. You spoke to surface water and groundwater the other time, and there is a report written by a couple of gentlemen who are based in Benin, where you are right now, talking about the fact that the more we dig boreholes, the more we put our water resources at risk. Could you speak to that, if you agree with them, and what is it that people do not know, concerning this particular issue?
Yes, it is true. Presently, the practice of sinking boreholes in Nigeria is not regulated. And this is one issue which the National Water Bill that the Ministry of Water Resources has been driving seeks to correct. There is indiscriminate sinking of boreholes, maybe to meet a need. Of course, our public water supply systems have not risen, to the needs of water across our country. So a lot of people have resorted, to sinking of boreholes at any point and at any time, around their homes. But it needs to be regulated. First and foremost, a number of people sink boreholes wherever they like, not minding the fact that they could, by such boreholes, be polluting even the underground water. There are supposed to be regulations about where you can sink a borehole, how deep boreholes should be, and all of that. And once one borehole is sunk, how far apart from that one another one can be sunk. But so far in the country, all these have not been practiced. And of course, that puts everyone in danger. Because if you sink a borehole, for instance, where it should not be, for instance, close to a soakaway, which is close to the toilet in your home, you are indirectly polluting the underground water and therefore endangering everybody else. We even find that in some cases, some industries have formed the habit of putting their effluents, sinking boreholes just to evacuate the effluents from their industrial practices. And this endangers everybody. We find some persons who are, practicing aquaculture, emptying the wastewater through boreholes directly into the underground water. This endangers everybody, and it's not right. And this is why we've been saying that the sinking of boreholes must be regulated, because apart from the geological, impact of indiscriminate sinking of boreholes, the underground water resource, which is a vast source of fresh water, everybody also needs to be protected in a sustainable manner.
But I think this makes it more dire, the fact that we're staring, climate change in the face, and there have been dire predictions about what might happen if this trend goes on. And I wonder for government, this is happening, by the way, because there was a void, and people had to fill the void. I remember those days we used to have running water corporations across the country, but they went moribund, as it were, and people had to find a way to get water themselves. So people had to meet those needs to get boreholes or sink wells and have the pumping machines and all of that and the rest. But I'd like you to talk to us about this climate change, the challenge we're facing with climate change, with the indiscriminate sinking of borehole. I imagine what's happening to all the aquifers around. If we keep sinking anyhow, I wonder what might happen in the coming days. Don't forget, this affects food production as well. I know that, your agency has some work around that. So talk to us about the coming days, what we should be doing. You say we need to regulate it. Who should be regulating it? What should people be doing? How do they meet that need which they have if government is not forthcoming?
Okay, I'll respond to you on two fronts. First and foremost, it is a responsibility of government to regulate, the indiscriminate sinking of. And this is what the National Water Bill, which has been in the National Assembly from the 8th Assembly to now the 9th Assembly, has been seeking to do, in a way that state governments, agencies should regulate the sinking of boreholes. But having said that, I must also admit that the investment in water has not been adequate. What you find is that, yes, like you said, in yesteryears, we used to have access to, pipe-borne water in our homes or, along our streets. But over time, population has grown and far surpassed the capacity of such water systems. And besides, we had also taken for granted the fact that a liter of water costs a sizable amount of money, and we were not paying for water. We were just, using water from those public water systems as though it was free. Over the years, as population grew and the sizes of such public waterworks would no longer respond to the water needs of the increasing population, and people were not paying for water, state governments were no longer able to sustain the service of, first and foremost, providing power to power the water systems, providing treatment chemicals to even treat the water before it's put out in the mains or supplies to homes, or even maintaining the dams and the entire gamut of infrastructure, that ensure that the water, is treated and pumped to the homes. So over the years, because these investments dwindled, the systems could no longer be maintained and sustained. So that is the situation we're in. And that's why we've been talking about the need for better investment. And one way to secure this investment is to bring in the private sector, which is what our National Water Bill has been seeking to do, to guarantee that when the private sector invests in water, they are sure of returns. We pay for airtime. I wonder why we do not consider that it's also necessary for us to pay for water. So your question on climate change. Of course, climate change also imperils our access to water. But we think that the vast groundwater resource that we have would also be our response to be able to meet the impact of climate change. And this is why this year's theme of the World Water Day, groundwater, making the invisible visible, is key.
Well, he also asked the question around what we should be doing in the immediate short-term and long-term future, because you have told us what we have not done that has brought us thus far, and you have spoken to private sector intervention and all of that. So what should we be doing now? Because it would seem like we probably don't even understand how severe or how dire the issues we have on our hands are, especially given the number of boreholes that have been sunk, the risks we have already placed ourselves in, and he also spoke about the aquifers that we have already compromised with the indiscriminate sinking of boreholes. In the coming days, what should we be doing, and what are the consequences if we don't?
To answer you directly, what we should be doing from now going forward is to first and foremost recognize that water is key to our common existence. Second, that everyone has a right to water. Where you have access, learn to manage the water at your disposal in a sustainable manner so that others can also have access. But when you waste water like ice, you're denying somebody else of access, same access to water. Then we need to invest in our water works. We need to invest in our water system. We need to have more of our urban centers connected to public water systems where water flows in every home. Boreholes are actually not the best way out. It's an easy resort, that a lot of people have come to recognize. But that will not be sustainable over time. There is a need for better investment.
My apologies, just a quick one. You talked earlier about regulating activities of sinking boreholes and all of that. Whose responsibility is that supposed to be? And is there a role for local government in all of this water talk?
The responsibility for regulating the indiscriminate sinking of boreholes is that of the state governments and the local governments. And that provision has been made in the National Water Bill and is under consideration, where a commission will regulate the practices that surround water. But the states and the local governments are the ones that will have the responsibility to regulate the sinking, where, how deep, and all of that. And even who sinks the boreholes, because even the drilling of boreholes is a professional thing that not everybody knows how or what to do. So all of that revolves around the state and local governments. Fortunately, water is on the concurrent list, of our constitution, and it empowers the federal government to provide bulk water through dams and all of that, while the state governments undertake distribution and reticulation, across, as well as generating revenue to maintain the water works.
Clearly, we need to pay more attention, Mr. Ahmed, to that water bill, added to the fact that last year, 3,604 people actually died as a result of cholera, which, as we know, is largely caused by taking in contaminated water. So clearly, this is a major issue on our hands. That's way more than COVID we had within that same period. But in the meantime, we'd like to thank you so much for your time. Mr. Saliu Ahmed is the Managing Director, Benin Owena River Basin Development Authority. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on this International Water Day.
Thank you for having me. Water for all. Thank you.
Indeed.
Yeah, with about 90% of your body made of water. Dr. Peter.
Is it 90 or 60?
Well, I don't know. Sounds like 90 to me. If you squeeze everything, it will probably less than that.
Oh, goodness.
Well, Dr. Peter Idialo is speaking about water resources. Water as a resource. Water is life, he writes. But unfortunately in Nigeria, many do not have access to potable water. And this includes both rural and urban areas. Another problem is the indiscriminate contamination of both surface and groundwater resources by continuous discharge of untreated industrial sewage effluents into public drains, which ultimately end up in our lagoons, rivers, and groundwater aquifers. The government needs to allow adequate participation of professional private sector practitioners, I believe, in the areas of planning, execution, and operation of water supply. It's high time government relinquished waterworks activities to the private sector for professionalism and sustainability.
Clearly, water does not have any enemy. Because Henry has also tweeted on the same issue, but he focuses on the statistics, and he thinks that statistics also lie when deliberate misrepresentation for untruth. More than 1/3 of Nigerians drink polluted water, when all the unwholesomely packaged sachet water and untreated borehole water that more than 70% of the population drink are added. I know NAFDAC has been doing some yeoman's job on all of this, but it's important to keep this ongoing and pay attention to them.
Professor Monoka Enakina says, the development of our economy juxtaposed with the economic empowerment of the average citizen is a travesty. We need frugal leaders with the wherewithal to manage the intricacies and policies of our peculiar economy that's import-dependent and non-sustainable.
Take a look at the tweet from Daily Concept, as Olagujo Oladile saying business and consumer confidence are being harmed by the uncertainty surrounding price development and its influence on economic activity. The risks to inflation are on the upside. Production, in quotes, is the answer because it's the key to solving economic problems, he says.
Festus Akimboyewa, on the first conversation we had, despite CBN's MPC decisions, inflation will intensify beyond its current level. While we don't expect government to solve every problem, as no government can solve every problem, federal government must respond aggressively to the rising food prices because Nigerians are really hungry.
And finally, from Law Alpha C2 saying, it is expected that all those plethora of decisions by MPC ought to jumpstart the economy and improve lives. The stark reality is that people are suffering, there's inflation, our currency has lost its value considerably.
Every effort today should be geared towards making Nigeria better. Play your role.
Absolutely.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
I'm Kayode Okikulu. Let's take some water today. It does good for the body.